He sent her to voicemail at 4:52 on a Wednesday afternoon in January. Not with hesitation, just his thumb, one clean motion, and her name disappeared from the screen. That's the part Marlowe will never be able to get around. Not the ice, not the impact. Not waking up under fluorescent lights with a stranger's hands on her face. It's the image she can't stop returning to. Silas Crane setting his phone face down on a mahogany conference table and continuing mid-sentence, like her name was something he'd already decided not to read. Marlowe Vance had been trying to reach him for 2.5 hours. She had something to tell him. 2 things, actually. One that was terrifying, and one that was the bravest thing she'd decided in 4 years. He would not find out either of them, not that night. Silas ran a private equity fund out of a 42nd floor office in Chicago's Loop. He had rebuilt 3 failing companies before he turned 40. He did not make decisions slowly, and he did not make them emotionally. When Marlowe's name appeared on his phone at 4:52 in the middle of the Alderman acquisition close. 7 investors around the table, $380 million in motion, 1 signature short of done, he calculated quickly and efficiently. She knows I'm in closing. If it were urgent, she'd text. She always texts when it's urgent. She had texted at 2:47 p.m. Silas, can you call when you get a break? It's about Bo. At 3:15, please, when you can. He had not seen the messages, or he had seen the notification, a thin banner at the top of his screen while he was reviewing the final term sheet and let it collapse without opening it. Both were true in different ways. Bo was 8 years old. Marlowe's son, brown-eyed and gap-toothed, who had eaten half a blueberry waffle that morning and told her his sneakers were too tight and run towards the school bus without looking back, because 8-year-olds don't look back. Bo had collapsed on the playground at Riverview Elementary at 2:34 p.m. He was seizing for 4 minutes on the blacktop behind the gym while a 5th grader ran to get the school nurse. Marlowe was in surgery when the page came through. She was an ER attending at Northwestern Memorial, wrist-deep in a chest wound, and she could not get to a phone for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of her hands doing one thing while her mind was already somewhere else entirely. She got to St. Anthony's Children's Hospital at 4:21. Bo was awake. He was scared and pale and wearing a hospital gown that was too big for him, and when Marlowe walked into his room, he said, "I didn't know where you were," in the specific tone of a child who has been very frightened and is now pretending not to have been. She held him for a long time without saying anything. She could feel his heartbeat against her collarbone, steadier than hers. Dr. Okafor, the pediatric neurologist on duty, spoke to Marlowe in the family consultation room at 4:40. The imaging showed something that needed further evaluation. The word she used was one Marlowe had spoken clinically herself, maybe 200 times. It sounded different when it was your child's brain being described. It sounded like the floor dropping out of a room you thought you knew. She sat with it for a few minutes after Dr. Okafor left. She sat in a plastic chair in a consultation room that smelled of artificial pine and old coffee, and she stared at the table, and she thought about what she had been carrying since 6:30 that morning. That morning, before school, Bo had asked her a question. He had been tying his sneakers badly. He still tied them a little badly, and he'd said it without looking up, in the offhand way children ask the things they've been thinking about for a long time. Mom, do you think Silas could be my dad? Like, actually? Marlowe had been pouring coffee. She had stopped. She had put down the mug. She thought about it for a long time before she said anything, because Bo deserved an honest answer, not a careful one. She thought about Silas showing up to Bo's school play, even though there had been a conference call he'd had to reschedule. About Bo laughing at something Silas said in the car on the way to the Science Museum, a genuine laugh, the kind that scrunches his whole face. About how Silas had once sat at the kitchen table for 40 minutes, helping Bo glue a model rocket together, both of them concentrating so hard they hadn't noticed her in the doorway. Yeah, she had said finally, I think he could. Bo had finished tying his shoe. He had said okay like it was settled, like she had confirmed a fact he had already mostly decided. Then the bus had come. She had spent the entire day carrying that. I think he could. She had decided, somewhere between her first patient and her fourth, that she was going to tell Silas tonight. Not the careful version she had been rehearsing for months, not the qualified version that left space for retreat. The real version. Beau asked me this morning if you could be his father. I told him yes. I want that. I'm ready for that. She was still carrying it at 4:52 in the family consultation room at St. Anthony's when she called Silas for the first time. Voicemail. She texted Silas, "I'm at St. Anthony's with Beau. He had a seizure at school. He's okay right now, but I need to talk to you. Please call." At 5:08, she called again. Voicemail on the third ring. She sat for a moment and looked at the wall. There was a children's drawing mounted near the door, a crayon sun, a crayon house, 4 stick figures of unequal size standing outside it. The tallest figure had a word bubble, home. At 5:31, she called a third time. Voicemail on the second ring. He had sent it manually. He had looked at her name and made the choice. She put the phone in her pocket and went back to Beau. He was watching something on the ceiling-mounted TV, a nature documentary about octopuses. He had pulled his knees up to his chest, and he was eating crackers from a small hospital packet with the focused dedication of someone who has decided to be fine. When she came in, he looked at her. "Is Silas coming?" She kept her face neutral. She was very good at keeping her face neutral. "He's in a big meeting. He'll call as soon as he's done." Beau turned back to the octopuses. "Okay," he said, in a way that meant he understood that adults were sometimes unavailable, which was something he had understood since he was very small, since before Silas, since his father had made it necessary for him to understand it. Marlowe sat in the vinyl chair beside his bed and watched the octopus on the screen change color in one smooth, impossible second. At 7:15, Dr. Okafor came back. She said Beau would need to stay overnight for monitoring. She said they wanted a follow-up MRI in the morning. She said the word specialist and the name of a pediatric neurology team at Lurie Children's Hospital, which was where the more complex cases went, which was where Marlowe herself referred patients when things were beyond the scope of St. Anthony's. Marlowe understood exactly what that meant. She understood it in the clinical part of her brain, which was still running correctly, still assessing, still categorizing. The other part, the part that had watched Beau tie his sneakers that morning, the part that had said, "I think he could." That part was sitting in a locked room somewhere behind her sternum. She got Beau settled. She sat with him until he fell asleep, which took longer than usual because he was in a strange bed in a strange room and the crackers had worn off, and he wanted the stuffed animal he called Captain. A navy blue seal with one eye missing that lived on his bed at home. She promised she would go get Captain. She promised she would be back before he woke up. She left 3 voicemails total before she stopped. The last one she kept short. "I needed you tonight and you weren't there. Call me back." She did not cry in Beau's room. She cried in the elevator, briefly, with her hand over her mouth. By the time the doors opened in the lobby, she had pulled herself back together. She had learned early, as a single mother, as an ER doctor, as a woman who had put herself back together after a marriage that hadn't survived her residency, that there were moments where you felt the thing and then kept going anyway. This was one of those. She went to get Captain. The parking garage was cold, the specific wet cold of a Chicago January that gets inside your coat before you have walked 10 feet. She scraped the ice off her windshield with the emergency scraper she kept in her trunk, another skill developed in the years of doing things alone, and drove out into the night. The roads were worse than she had realized. The temperature had dropped during the hours she had been inside, and the light snow from the afternoon had iced over into something slick and deceptive, the kind that looks fine until you brake. She drove carefully. She had always been a careful driver. She was thinking about what Dr. Okafor had said. She was thinking about Beau's face when he asked if Silas was coming. She was thinking about the question he had asked that morning, like, actually. With such trust in the word actually, such careful hope. She was not crying. She had finished that. She was just thinking and driving carefully, and listening to the radio play something she did not register. The car that ran the red on Damon Avenue did not see her until it was already happening. The impact was on the passenger side, which meant she turned toward it rather than away, which meant the airbag deployed against her shoulder, and her head snapped left into the window. The glass did not break. She did not break. Not badly. She would find out later that not badly meant a moderate concussion, 3 bruised ribs, and a laceration at her hairline that required 6 stitches. She sat in the stopped car for a moment. The radio was still playing. She thought, Beau's car seat is at home. Why am I thinking about that? Someone knocked on her window. A man, 50s, gray coat, alarmed face. She could hear him saying something. She couldn't quite parse it. There was a ringing in her ears, making everything difficult to parse. She felt along the floor for her phone. The airbag had knocked everything. Her bag was somewhere she couldn't find. The man opened her door. He said something that included the word ambulance. She said, I'm a doctor, which she immediately understood was not the relevant information. She was transported to Mercy General Trauma Center, 3 miles from the intersection where it happened. They brought her in on a backboard. Her bag was under the buckled passenger seat. The paramedics logged it and left it for the tow unit. At intake, they listed her as Jane Doe, approximately 35, head trauma, pending identification. She knew who she was. She was Marlowe Vance. She was a doctor. She had a son named Beau who was at St. Anthony's and who needed captain by morning. She said this to the intake nurse, who nodded and made a note. But the concussion had done something to the coherence of her speech. She was clear on the facts and scrambled on the delivery, and what came out was not as organized as what was in her head. The nurse marked the file. Patient appears disoriented. States she has a child. Contact information not yet confirmed. Her phone was not recovered from the wreck that night. Silas came out of the Alderman closing at 8:44 p.m. The signature was done. 7 men shook hands, and somebody opened a bottle of something old and expensive. Silas had a glass because it would have been strange not to, and then he picked up his phone. 4 missed calls, Marlowe. The text from 2:47 and 3:15 loaded when he unlocked the screen. It's about Beau. And the third text from 5:31, Silas. I'm at St. Anthony's with Beau. He had a seizure at school. He's okay right now, but I need to talk to you. Please call. He read it twice. He called her back. Voicemail. Her voice, warm and recorded, and something in him went cold in a way that was different from the calculated coldness he used for decisions. He called again. Voicemail. He texted, I'm out of the meeting. I just saw everything. I'm so sorry. Call me. He looked at the timestamp on her last text. She had sent it at 5:31. It was almost 9 o'clock. 3.5 hours. He told Gerard he was leaving. He was in a cab before he finished saying it. He called St. Anthony's from the cab. The charge nurse confirmed that Beau Vance was a patient, stable, and that his mother had left the building at approximately 7:40 to retrieve items from home and had not yet returned. Left at 7:40, not yet returned. It was 9:03. He called Marlowe 6 more times, voicemail each time. He arrived at St. Anthony's at 9:22 and went directly to Beau's room. The boy was asleep. Finally asleep, the charge nurse said quietly. He had been asking for his mom. Silas stood in the doorway of Beau's hospital room and looked at this child sleeping in a too-big gown under institutional lights, and he felt something move through him that was large and without name. He went back to the nurse's station and said, quietly and without particular inflection, her car was a gray Honda Civic. She left here an hour and 20 minutes ago to drive 15 minutes to her apartment. She's not answering her phone. I need you to help me figure out where she is. They found the accident report through a city incident log at 10:47. A 2-vehicle collision at Damon and Cermak. 1 driver treated on scene, minor injuries. 1 driver transported to Mercy General Trauma Center. Female, early to mid-30s, head trauma, listed as Jane Doe pending ID confirmation. Silas was in a cab to Mercy General before he finished reading. He walked into the trauma center at 11:08 and went to the admissions desk and said what he knew. Gray Honda, Damon and Cermak, female, brown hair, 5'4", a scar on her left forearm from a kitchen accident she had told him about once over dinner in the first months they were together. She was a doctor. Her name was Marlowe Vance. They took him upstairs. She was awake. She was sitting up in the bed with her knees bent and her hands in her lap. The bandage had her hairline white against her skin, and she looked up when he came through the door with an expression that was composed and exhausted and something else he couldn't immediately name. She knew him. That was the first thing. She looked at him and she knew exactly who he was, and what she felt about him was visible on her face for one unguarded second before she arranged it into something more neutral. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He stopped just inside the door. He had run through what to say in the cab, and all of it left him the moment he saw her. "Are you?" "I'm fine. Concussion, some ribs. They're keeping me overnight." A pause. "Beau." "He's okay. He's asleep. I was just there." Something in her face shifted, relief, briefly visible, and then back to the composed thing. "Good," she said. "That's good. He needed Captain." "Captain?" "His stuffed seal. That's where I was going." She looked at her hands. "I was going to get Captain." Silas crossed the room and sat down in the chair beside her bed. He kept his hands on his knees. The way you sit when you are trying not to reach for something you are not sure you have the right to reach for. "I got your messages," he said. She looked at him. At 8:44, when the meeting ended, he said it plainly. He was not going to make it smaller than it was. "I looked at my screen 3 times today. Your name was on it 3 times, and I made a choice each time to finish the meeting first." He paused. "I'm telling you that directly because the alternative is pretending I didn't see it, and I did." Marlowe looked at him for a long moment. "Beau asked me something this morning," she said. He waited. "He asked if you could be his dad, like actually." She said it without decoration, the way she said hard things. He was tying his shoe. He asked like he had been working up to it for a while. Silas was very still. "I told him yes," she said it quietly. "I had decided. I was going to tell you tonight. I have been scared to tell you for 6 months, because it means I am all the way in, not half in, not careful, and that scared me." She looked at the window, the dark glass, the parking lot lights below. "I called you because Beau was in the hospital, and I needed you. And I called you because I was finally ready to say the thing I had been not saying." He did not reach for an excuse. He looked at her face. He thought about his phone face down on the mahogany table. He thought about the text at 2:47 and the word please in the 3:15 message, which was not a word Marlowe used easily. He had enough self-honesty to sit with what he had done without negotiating around it. She told him about Dr. Okafor. All of it. The imaging, the specialist at Lurie's, what the referral meant. She told him the way she talked about medical things, clearly, with the terms defined, without minimizing and without catastrophizing. She told him what they knew and what they didn't and what came next. He listened. He did not try to fix it or accelerate it or apply resources to it until she was completely finished. "What do you need?" he said. "Tonight? Nothing. I need you to make sure someone checks on Beau before his MRI in the morning, because I won't be discharged until at least noon. A beat. His teacher is Miss Corrigan. She has my number. The school will need to know he's out this week." "I'll handle it." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I know you'll handle it. You are very good at handling things." She said it without cruelty, which was almost harder. That's not the part I ever doubted. She asked him to stay in the waiting room in case something changed with Beau, but she asked him not to be there when she was discharged, because she needed to think, and she needed the thinking to happen without him in the room, making it complicated. He went. He brought Captain to Beau the next morning. He sat with the boy through the MRI, which took 40 minutes, during which Beau asked Silas 4 questions about how the machine worked. And Silas answered 3 accurately, and admitted he didn't know the answer to the 4th, which was about magnets. Beau accepted this with grave seriousness. Marlowe was discharged at 12:30. She came directly to St. Anthony's and walked into Beau's room and Silas was sitting in the chair by the window with a picture book about trains he had borrowed from the nurse's station, reading it to Bo, who was technically too old for picture books about trains and was listening with complete absorption. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Neither of them noticed her right away. She thought about what she was looking at. She thought about the question Bo had asked while tying his shoe. She thought about the calls she had made from the consultation room and the voicemail that had taken them all. She thought both things are true. He was reading her son a picture book about trains. He had sent her to voicemail 3 times. She knocked lightly on the doorframe. They both looked up. Mom Bo said it like it solved something. She went to him. She held him the way a mother holds a child she has been away from too long. And Bo let her, which he was starting to be at an age where he didn't always let her. Silas stood. He said he would give them time. She said okay. He left the book on the chair. She did not end things in a hospital room. She was not a woman who made large decisions in the middle of acute moments. She made this one over 3 weeks. She made it carefully, not from anger, because the anger had moved through her and settled into something quieter and more permanent, but from clarity. The clarity of someone who has finally seen the thing she had been half looking at for a year and a half. She called him on a Thursday evening. She said, "I'm not ending this because of one night. I'm ending it because the night showed me something that was already true. You move through your life like a closed system, Silas. There's you, and then there's the margin where everyone else fits. I thought I could live in the margin. Bo thought he could live there too." He did not argue. He asked 2 questions and then was quiet. She said, "Bo is going to be okay. The specialist at Lurie's has a treatment plan. I wanted you to know that." He said, "Thank you for telling me." She said, "I know you love him." And then because it was true and she was not going to leave it out, "I know you love me. It's not enough if the love doesn't show up when it's supposed to." She hung up. Bo's treatment started in February. By March, he was back at school, sleeping in his own bed with Captain tucked under his arm. The specialist used the word manageable with the careful optimism of someone who meant it. Marlowe said the word back to herself in the car on the way home, manageable, and let it be enough. In April, she found a letter in her mailbox, not an email. A letter, handwritten on plain paper and handwriting, she recognized from grocery lists he used to leave on her counter, the deliberate, slightly cramped script of someone who had been taught cursive and mostly abandoned it. It said, "I want to tell you something I should have said when I still had the right to. I know what I was choosing every time I chose the meeting. I told myself you were steady, that you didn't need me the way other people needed things, that your competence meant you were fine. I used your strength against you. That's the honest version, and you deserve the honest version. I'm not sending this to ask for anything. I'm sending it because I should have been better, and you should know that I know that." She read it twice. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time after, with Bo's homework spread out on one end and her coffee going cold on the other, and she thought about what a person owed themselves and what a person owed someone who was genuinely trying to become something different. She did not call him, not that week. There were 2 more letters after that, each short, none of them asking for anything. She called him in May on a Sunday morning from the kitchen while Bo was still asleep. The Chicago spring was coming through the window. Her coffee was actually hot for once. He picked up on the second ring. "I read the letters," she said. "I know. I hoped you would. The one where you said you used my strength against you." She looked out the window at the street coming to life. "I've thought about that a lot. I think that's the truest thing you've ever said to me." He was quiet. "Bo asked me last week if I'd talk to you." She kept her voice even. "He asked if you were still around. I didn't know what to tell him." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I wasn't sure yet, that I was figuring it out." A pause. He said, "Okay, he takes things better than I expect him to." She looked at the light on the kitchen floor. "He's 8. He shouldn't have to." "No," Silas said, "he shouldn't." She let a moment sit between them. "I'm not ready to say yes to what I was going to say yes to before," she said, "and I don't know if I'll get there again. I need you to understand that before anything else. If you come back into this, it's not a reunion. It's a different thing. Slower, with more room to leave if it stops working." "I understand." "And you answer the phone." She said it quietly and directly. "That's not a metaphor. When I call, you answer. If you're somewhere you genuinely can't step out, you text me within 10 minutes and tell me why. Every time. Because I have a son who I will not let watch me accept less than that again." "Okay," he said. "Just okay." "I mean it," he said. "I know what it costs now. Before, I thought I was agreeing to something easy. I know what it actually means to choose a person over everything else. It's not instinct for me. It's a practice. I have to do it deliberately until it becomes what I reach for first." She sat with that. It was the most honest thing he had said to her in 2 years of knowing him. Maybe because he had finally stopped trying to sound like someone who had everything managed. "Are you free Saturday?" she said. "Not dinner, just coffee, somewhere neutral. Beau won't be there. Just us, seeing if this is something." "I'm free," he said. "I'll text you where." She hung up. She sat in the kitchen for another minute, the phone on the table, the spring light doing its thing across the floor. Then she got up and started Beau's cereal, because he would be awake, soon wanting breakfast and asking where Captain was. Ordinary, constant, unglamorous, irreplaceable, and that was the life she had built and would not rearrange for anyone who was not willing to show up for it exactly as it was. On Saturday, she was 4 minutes late because Beau's overnight bag needed repacking and she couldn't find his toothbrush. She texted Silas from the driveway, running behind. 4 minutes. His reply came before she had set the phone down. "I'm here. Take your time." She looked at the message for a long moment. Then she pulled out of the driveway and drove towards something she had not yet decided to call hope, but which, if she was honest with herself, was beginning to feel like the start of one.